All right, everyone, please welcome onto the podcast today Amie Richards. She is the Senior Manager of Technology and Experience and leads the data monetization capability with West Monroe. She's joining us today to talk about driving value from data assets, a very important topic. And it's also a topic that she will be instructing at our, I guess leading, I would say, at our Modern Data Leaders Summit coming up in Las Vegas in February. We're going to dive into all of that good stuff. But Amie, before we jump in, do you mind sharing a little bit of background about yourself and how you got to where you are before we go into all the questions about driving value from data assets?
Sure. I got started in kind of public administration, research, analysis out of college. Made the move pretty quickly into consulting in the Pacific Northwest. That took me down to California and landed me here in Phoenix ultimately. Been with West Monroe now for a little over 3 years. My entire career has been focused on using data to drive actionable decisions and value from that data. Starting within government and ending up now work with clients across industries, across sizes, across the globe to measure, capture, manage that value from their data. So super exciting topic.
Yeah,
Love what I do. Happy to be bringing that here today.
that's excellent. And I could be wrong here, but at least in my estimation, it feels like, this kind of data product driving value from data assets seems to be on the uptick right now. Would that be safe to say, as opposed to maybe several years ago?
Yeah, I think that the question's always been there, and there's always been interest. Earlier in my career, I won't get into numbers, but earlier in my career, there's a lot of focus kind of on consolidating, storing, and managing our data. Very forward-thinking organizations were doing that with value in mind, but more recently, the shift has definitely been into using that data to drive value. Um, I think that there are a couple of terms, like I know we'll throw it out there, data monetization, that are really driving some new inquiry and new interest in this space. But it's been there, but uptick I think is a good word. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so all right, let's jump in here because driving value from data assets, I think you could say data assets. A lot of people are saying data products. So how would you define, Amie, a data asset or a data product?
Yeah. Some of the terms we're going to talk about today are kind of broad
Yeah.
and used in different ways. So, aligning on how I think about them, a data product is really anything that it could be a tool, it could be a system that you put in place, it could be a data repository that's curated, a service that you enable, but something that really uses the data that we have to provide tangible value for an organization. And then when we think about the definition of value, a lot of organizations might think that that's just new revenue. If we're saying data product, it must be something we sell, but really it can be broader than that. Something that drives revenue, new revenue, enhances revenue, provides opportunities for cost takeout, drives efficiencies within the organization that then saves, real money, time, optimizes processes, improves customer experience, user experience, any of that, right? As long as it's tangible, measurable value, then we can manage it as a data product.
Yeah, so obviously quite broad there based on that. Well, so then I guess my next question is with the customers that you're working with, clients you're working with, how frequently are you seeing, these customers building data products? Is it a regular thing?
All the time. That's I don't know that I would have a job if they weren't, because that's what I do. That's all I do. Um, but really, you know, it's very much so across the spectrum. So more
Hmm.
recently, I have been focused with clients who are looking to commercialize their data, which, we'll get into a little bit later. But day to day, it could be something as, building a modern data platform with a data lake that's structured appropriately and curated for business consumption, or a data warehouse similarly. something that's enabling self-service analytics across the org, so that way we don't have so much shadow IT
Hmm.
or, you know, analysts recreating reports manually and redoing data integrations manually every quarter to do those recurring needs that they have. Could be automating other manual processes or workflows through integrating business applications. Real hot topic around using Gen AI for chatbots, whether that's externally or internally for research and operations. I know we have a couple of different tools like that internal at West Monroe that we use.
Hmm.
Really cuts down on a lot of our research time that we might have originally done. Um, Predictive models, right? Anything in the data science space, things like customer segmentation or customer churn, providing personalized recommendations, product recommendations, cross-sell, upsell. Um, in the insurance space, a lot around optimizing workflows, developing like claims trust scores to bridge the human tech gap and kind of that spectrum there.
Mm.
Really around optimization. So lots of things happening on that internal, or, you know, as my mentor, Doug Laney, would call it, the indirect monetization side of things. So lots of that happening, but it's also happening on the other side for
Hmm.
direct monetization.
Okay, yeah. Well, I was actually that's my leading me nicely to my next question here. I was going to ask you about monetization. How are companies trying to monetize these data products? And maybe you kind of talked a little bit about it, but maybe some examples would be nice.
Yeah. So first, you know, another terminology thing. Monetization is a very interesting term. I see some clients who refer to the internal use of data, right? Indirect monetization.
Hmm.
A lot of times, organizations or just people I talk to, when you say monetization, they're thinking of direct monetization, which more and more I'm referring to as commercialization to draw that distinction when we are talking about products that would be sold to third parties and drive revenue. Kind of aligns with the concept of data product and kind of how that
Right.
can be interpreted different ways. But aside from that, yes, we are. It's my primary focus right now is working with different clients across industries, really, which is interesting. Um, Typically, we're starting with quick wins, which end up being more traditional sale of data. So
Hmm.
direct sales of a curated data set. That could be through, there's a lot of different data brokers out there. There's data marketplaces that you can, set yourself up on, or develop a custom API, developer portal type concept to sell data directly. That's typically a quick win that organizations will get started with as they're trying to justify, build, or fund additional monetization opportunities. We do have clients who are doing other things, developing insights portals where they're adding, dashboards and insights and recommendations to client-facing applications, or developing analytics platforms where they will, throw something into, whether it's Azure, AWS, whatever their platform is that provides access to the data, provides some analytics tools where third parties can subscribe to access to, come
Oh,
in within the four walls of the organization. So it kind of bypasses all of that concern around selling the data outside of the organization or letting it out in that way. We'll talk about that a bit. That's a huge conversation more recently, especially in some of the more regulated industries.
hmm.
Lots of opportunities to still monetize data while keeping it within your four walls. But there's a lot of different ways that organizations can monetize their data as commercializable data products. And our framework goes through some patterns that help deduce those ideas.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like the distinction there with at least monetization, commercialization. So it can be a little bit easier to kind of identify potentially what they're looking to do. Well,
Mhm.
so then how successful are these initiatives by these different companies? And maybe do you have any best practices for monetizing or commercializing the data product?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Typically when people think about, the top successes in the market, and not just talking about my work, but things that you'll see, we think about, we might think about LinkedIn or Amazon or any of these really big digital native organizations that are tech forward. Um, they are very much so leading the way when it comes to data monetization, and they're making billions of dollars through it.
Right.
I'm going to avoid mentioning any other names. But we've seen, major acquisitions of organizations recently, purely for the value of their data, and those go into the billions of dollars as well. So huge opportunities here when it comes to monetizing data and the value of the data. But it's really not just those tech forward digital organizations. We're working primarily with organizations in other industries. I particularly enjoy working in the healthcare space here because historically, there's a lot of time spent on healthcare organizations preparing data, providing data to support research, to support regulations, and all of that. And they aren't historically recouping the benefits of it.
Hmm.
And so we've been working to kind of pivot that a bit, and drive some of that value back to these organizations. So been working with different organizations across the healthcare spectrum, hospital systems, global life science organizations, uh, a lot of kind of PE-led provider and health tech orgs, right? Really looking to drive up their multiples.
Mhm.
And when we go through our process to understand the data that they have, identify the value, quantify that value, we're going after opportunities that are often in the 7 to 8 figures, and that's for one data set, one data product, annually, right? These numbers can get
Mhm.
really big, and look into retail. There's a lot of opportunities across industries here, and I mean, a lot of these opportunities are going to drive smaller dollar amounts that accumulate, but there are top dollar opportunities here, through data in some of these industries that you might not typically assume that. And then, from the kind of keys to success piece or best practices, it really stems from having a good understanding of your data assets or the data that you have available to you. Doesn't have to be curated, doesn't have to be governed. You just need to know what you have, because then you can make all of that happen to enable a product. So don't, if you take one thing from what I'm saying right now, don't let the maturity of your current state data hinder you from pursuing data monetization opportunities. But knowing the data that you have, building off of that, understanding your extended stakeholder ecosystem. So thinking beyond, here's my internal stakeholders, here's my existing customers or partners, suppliers, but what other organizations and other industries are impacted by the insights that your data can provide. Thinking about that, being creative in how you manage the myths or challenges or guardrails that you might have in your mind or legitimately have based on regulations, to navigate feasibility challenges and ultimately optimize the value that you can provide through your data. Having an approach and walking through that process strategically, will really put you in a good position to move forward, um, through the rest of the process around, go to market and product launch and build and all of that other stuff. So that's the foundation.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I like your key point there. Don't worry about your maturity necessarily to get started with this. I was going to ask you how can organizations get started as my next question. I think you kind of answered that a little bit. Was there anything else that you might want to tap into to answer how organizations can get started?
Really, it comes down to the efficient planning and prioritization. Um, so we have a framework, and that framework's covered in the different sessions that we'll have
Mhm.
in Vegas, but that really walks through some of those important things like executive alignment, the product or use case ideation, understanding how to approach value estimation, assessing the feasibility and core feasibility characteristics, approaches for how to prioritize your backlog. So, where do you get started? Um, really gives you the info you need to, you know, understand where to focus and also make those investments with confidence.
Okay, fantastic. Well, now I'd like to switch up. I have my last question for you, Amy, and it's been a fantastic conversation. I'd like for you to maybe take us through a little bit about your session at our Modern Data Leaders Summit. Again, for folks, that'll be in February in Las Vegas. I will put a link in the description of this podcast for more information there. But, you know, can you give us some insight, Amy, into, what you're going to be discussing in that aptly named driving data assets session that you'll be teaching for us?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this session. So, this is something that, I walk through with our clients day in and day out. Had some great sessions in San Diego earlier this year on similar topics. But going into Vegas, really looking to get in the room with these leaders to go through these key frameworks and patterns, this process at a high level with them. So that way they're able to understand what those key components are to help identify and ultimately drive value from the data that they have. So these open discussions, and we'll be facilitating this workshop in a way that's going to enable leaders to walk away from the session with new ideas, refined ideas for data products, and an awareness of those key considerations for feasibility and guardrails that are going to be important for them to address along their data monetization journey.
Well, that's excellent, Amy, and I'm excited for all those folks that are going to have an opportunity to attend the Modern Data Leader Summit. Amy will be there, obviously, but we have a whole host of excellent sessions planned for that. Again, more information can be found on our website or in the description of this episode. Well, Amy, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I really appreciate your time. Last question is, if folks listen to this and they're interested in reaching out and inquiring, about your services or asking a question, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, by all means. Folks can reach out on LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Hmm.
We can get that link for you to put in here too. But if you just reach out to me, I'm happy to chat, happy to have a conversation. Obviously happy to discuss services as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, feel free to reach out.
amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thanks. To subscribe to the Speaking of Data podcast or to learn more about TDWI's research and training on all things data management and analytics, visit tdwi.org or click the link in the description below. Thanks for tuning in.